The Ulians laughed as they beat the starving humans, mocking their frail bodies and feeble resistance. They ridiculed humanity's primitive technology and pea-sized brains, smugly certain that the gap between their civilizations was unbridgeable. But the Ulians didn't realize something. Humans are the most dangerous game. Strip away their rights and resources, grind them into the dirt, and they'll still find a way to fight, to resist, to hope. Hope is the one thing oppressors fear most. It's an ember that refuses to die, no matter how hard you stomp it out. And that ember was stirring in the heart of Ralph Simmons. Ralph seethed with rage as he marched through the sewers, flanked by the tattered remnants of his resistance cell. The tunnels stank of piss and mildew. Rivulets of filthy water trickled down the cracked concrete. Every day was a bitter struggle just to survive under the heel of Umbra and his Ulian jackboots. They were always 2 steps ahead, always watching, ready to snuff out the slightest flicker of defiance. The memory of Simon, Ralph's brother, refused to fade. His blood-flecked face, the ragged hole in his chest, his final words gurgled through crimson froth. Never stop fighting. And then he was gone, life snuffed out by a casual flick of Umbra's wrist, discarded like garbage. Ralph's fists clenched until his knuckles whitened, nails carving bloodied crescents into his palms. He would avenge his brother and free his people from this living hell, or die trying. A faint spark of hope kindled as Trez, the cell's scrounger, burst into their hideout. The wiry teen bounced with excitement as he reverently set down his latest haul, a gunmetal cube, roughly the size of a soccer ball, etched with inscrutable alien lettering. He'd found it while scavenging the ruins of what had once been New York. Ralph's eyes widened as realization dawned. The artifact was no trinket. Trez's DNA scan lit up like a Christmas tree. The human genome was hard-coded into the device. If deciphered, it could be the key to unlocking powers that humans had only dreamed of in science fiction. Telekinesis, energy manipulation, telepathy. It was all within reach, and it could finally give them a fighting chance against the Ulian invaders. It was a long shot. The cube's technology was eons beyond anything they'd ever seen, and there would be no instruction manual. Activating those latent abilities, if they even existed, would push the human mind and body to its absolute limits. It would take every ounce of willpower, ingenuity, and tenacity that humanity could muster. And there was no time. Ulian scouts had been spotted nosing around the ruins, drawn by the same energy readings that tipped off Trez. Umbra knew about the artifact, and he knew that it represented an existential threat to Ulian supremacy. His forces would tear the planet apart to find it, and snuff out humanity's last hope like a bug. Ralph squared his shoulders, the burden of leadership settling heavily on his shoulders. He had to rally the tattered remnants of humanity. Failure was not an option. The alternative was too horrific to contemplate. An eternity of servitude, their culture and achievements ground to dust, their children wearing Ulian chains. This was humanity's last stand. Ralph and his team pored over the alien cube day and night, prodding its surface, scanning its intricate patterns, debating theories and ideas. Progress was slow and frustrating. They were fumbling in the dark, trying to decipher technology that was light years beyond their understanding. But Ralph refused to give up. He pushed them all to the brink of exhaustion, running test after test, simulation after simulation. "Come on, damn it," Ralph growled, glaring at the stubborn artifact. "Give me something, anything." He focused his mind, visualizing the cube rising off the table. Sweat beaded his forehead. A vein throbbed in his temple. The cube trembled, then lifted an inch, 2 inches. Ralph's concentration shattered, and it clattered back down. "Did you see that? I moved it!" Ralph exclaimed, his fatigue temporarily forgotten. The others crowded around, murmuring excitedly. Over the next grueling weeks, they honed their fledgling abilities. Ralph could now levitate small objects, even if his control was erratic. Sarah, their medic, discovered she could heal minor wounds with a touch. Trez could generate weak psionic pulses. But the power came at a steep price. Nosebleeds, migraines, and blackouts were common. They were pushing their minds and bodies to the limit. News of Ulian raids trickled in like a gathering storm. The aliens were tearing through human enclaves, leaving devastation in their wake. Then came word of a mass abduction. Ulian troops had captured dozens of civilians and resistance members from a nearby settlement. Ralph hastily assembled a rescue team. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they had a slim advantage. The Ulians wouldn't be expecting psionics. The infiltration started smoothly. Ralph used his powers to silently dispatch sentries and disable alarms. They crept through the dim corridors of the holding facility, neutralizing guards with quick, brutal efficiency. Chaos erupted as they breached the cell block. Alarms blared. Ulian reinforcements flooded in, plasma rifles blazing. Ralph and his team fought like cornered wolves, using every scrap of their psionic abilities and combat training. Sarah projected shimmering psi shields. Trez fired lancing psionic blasts, dropping Ulians left and right. In the madness, Ralph spotted a familiar figure. Umbra, his hated nemesis. The alien leader was locked in combat with Michael, Ralph's loyal second. Time seemed to slow. Michael fought with unmatched skill and courage, but Umbra was inhumanly fast and strong. A slash, a spray of crimson. Michael crumpled, his throat torn out. Something snapped inside Ralph. The air rippled around him, crackling with wild, psionic energy. Ulian's soldiers screamed as their weapons crumpled like tin foil, bones shattered, flesh ruptured. Equipment exploded in showers of sparks and shrapnel. Ralph's scream of primal rage and anguish echoed through the facility. And then the world went black. Ralph awoke in their hidden base, his head pounding, his body leaden with exhaustion. They'd accomplished the mission. The prisoners were free, but the cost was too high. Michael was gone, along with a dozen others, friends, comrades, brothers and sisters in arms. There was no time to grieve. Ulian scout ships were already sweeping the area, homing in on the psionic disturbance from Ralph's outburst. They had to run, scattered to the winds like hunted animals. When the Ulians came, Ralph was waiting. He stood alone, a calm center in the eye of the storm. Umbra and his elite warriors fanned out, weapons leveled, cold eyes glittering with malice. Psionic energy coruscated around Ralph, forming a shimmering aegis. Plasma bolts splashed harmlessly against his shield. With a thrust of his hand, he ripped weapons from Ulian grips, crushing them into unrecognizable scraps. Ralph and Umbra circled each other like predators, gazes locked. Umbra's lips curled in a cruel smile. "You actually think you can win, ape? I'll enjoy killing you." Ralph met the alien's gaze unflinchingly. "You'll try," he replied, his voice diamond hard. "But humanity will never stop fighting. We'll never stop resisting. And one day, we will end you." Then, with a final surge of power, Ralph unleashed a maelstrom of psionic force, hurling Umbra and his warriors back. The distraction bought precious seconds for the rest of the resistance to escape. Ralph turned and sprinted into the shadows, leaving a scene of devastation behind. In the days that followed, the tattered remnants of humanity hunkered in bolt holes and bunkers scattered across the planet. They tended wounds, shared meager rations, and mourned the fallen. But even now, battered and bleeding, they looked to Ralph for leadership, for hope. Ralph knew their situation was grim. They were a guttering flame in a hurricane, a whisper against a scream. Isolated cells could only achieve so much. They needed numbers, coordination, a united front. Most of all, they needed a spark to reignite the human spirit. So Ralph began to plan and prepare, reaching out to other resistance groups, gathering intelligence, sowing the seeds of revolution. It would take time and sacrifice and more blood than he dared contemplate. But he would forge humanity into a weapon that would drive the Ulians from Earth, or die trying, for Michael, for Simon, for every man, woman, and child who dreamed of a future free from alien tyranny. Ralph's hand closed around the alien cube in his pocket, a reminder of the power locked within the human genome and the key to their salvation or their doom. They were balanced on a razor's edge, but Ralph would not falter, would not yield. The fire of human defiance burned in his veins, unquenchable and all-consuming. This was only the beginning. Ralph stood before a ragtag assembly of resistance leaders, their faces etched with hunger and desperation. The abandoned subway tunnel echoed with whispers and shuffling feet. He took a deep breath, gripping the alien cube in his pocket. "We can't keep fighting like this," Ralph said, his voice carrying through the tunnel. "Scattered, divided, it's time to unite." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A grizzled man with an eye patch stepped forward. "And how do you propose we do that, Simmons? The Ulians crush any group larger than a dozen." Ralph nodded. "They do, but they've never faced an army of psionics." He held up the cube, its surface glowing faintly. "This is the key to unlocking humanity's potential. With it, we can train more people to use these abilities. We can build a force the Ulians can't stop." Skepticism gave way to cautious hope as Ralph outlined his plan. They would use their growing psionic abilities to locate other survivor groups, recruit them, and train them. Weeks turned to months as Ralph and his inner circle scoured the planet. They found pockets of humanity in mountain caves, abandoned mines, and forgotten bunkers. Each time, they made contact and began the arduous process of awakening latent psionic potential. In an old sports stadium, Ralph watched as Sarah guided a group of new recruits through basic telekinesis exercises. Sweat beaded on their foreheads as they strained to lift small objects. "Good," Sarah said. "Now focus on controlling the object's movement." Elsewhere, Trez was running a combat simulation. A group of psionics hurled debris at holographic Ulian soldiers, their faces set with fierce dedication. Ralph forged alliances wherever he could. He even found himself in a smoke-filled room, negotiating with the remnants of organized crime. "We need your networks," Ralph said to a scarred man in an ill-fitting suit. "Supply lines, safe houses. In return, we offer protection and a chance at revenge." The crime boss leaned back, considering. "And if we refuse?" Ralph's eyes glowed with psionic energy. "Then you can take your chances with the Ulians." As the resistance grew stronger, Umbra's tactics became more brutal. Cities burned under orbital bombardment. Ralph and his team barely escaped an ambush, racing through collapsing tunnels as Ulian troops closed in. "We need to strike back," Ralph said, poring over intelligence reports. "Hit them where it hurts." They planned a series of coordinated attacks on key Ulian installations. Ralph led a team against a communications relay, using his telekinesis to hurl explosives at pinpoint targets. Across the globe, other teams struck simultaneously. Umbra's retaliation was swift and merciless. Ralph's forces found themselves trapped, surrounded by waves of Ulian troops and war machines. The humans fought with everything they had, telekinetically deflecting energy blasts and launching psionic assaults that sent alien soldiers reeling. In the chaos of battle, Ralph spotted Umbra's ship taking off. "He's running!" Ralph shouted. "After him!" Ralph and his strongest psionics gave chase, their combined powers propelling them through the air. They caught up to Umbra's ship, tearing into its hull with sheer force of will. Inside, Ralph came face to face with his nemesis. Umbra sneered, energy crackling around him. "You're too late, human. Your world is doomed." Ralph's eyes blazed. "No, we're just getting started." The clash that followed shook the very air. Psionic energy crackled and roared as human and alien battled for supremacy. In the end, Umbra's broken body lay at Ralph's feet. Word of Umbra's defeat spread like wildfire. Ulian forces began to falter and retreat. In cities across the globe, humans rose up, their newfound psionic abilities turning the tide. Ralph stood atop a ruined skyscraper, watching as humans reclaimed their world. The war wasn't over, but for the first time in years, hope burned bright. Humanity had found its strength, and nothing would ever be the same. The taste of victory was still fresh when Ralph Simmons received the news. His team had captured an Ulian officer, prying crucial intelligence from the alien's mind. A massive armada was en route to Earth, poised to crush the human uprising. Ralph paced the makeshift war room, his mind racing. They couldn't withstand a full-scale invasion. Not yet. He banged his head on the table, causing the others to jump. "We strike first," Ralph declared. "Hit them before they reach Earth." His lieutenants exchanged worried glances. "With what?" Sarah asked. "We're stretched thin as it is." Ralph's eyes gleamed with fierce grit. "With everything we've got." They worked tirelessly, coordinating their forces across the globe. Stealth teams slipped through Ulian defenses, infiltrating shipyards and supply depots in nearby systems. Ralph's most powerful psionics gathered, preparing for an unprecedented display of their abilities. As the Ulian armada entered the solar system, humanity struck. Psionic energy surged through space, invisible tendrils latching onto the vanguard ships. Engines sputtered and died. Deflector shields flickered and failed. Ralph watched the tactical display, his eyebrows furrowed. "Now!" he barked into the comm. Strike teams swarmed the crippled Ulian vessels. The boarding actions were brutal, close-quarters affairs. Psionic warriors tore through bulkheads with their mines, hurling debris at the alien defenders. The ship-to-ship battles raged for hours, but one by one, the Ulian crews fell. Then Ralph saw it, the flagship, a monstrous dreadnought that dwarfed the other ships. "All psionics converge on the target," he ordered. Ralph led the assault himself, telekinetically deflecting energy blasts as they approached. The dreadnought's weapons blazed, but the humans pressed on, ripping into its hull. Inside, chaos reigned. Ralph sprinted down twisting corridors, his team in tow. They encountered fierce resistance, Ulian troops fighting with suicidal tenacity. A massive door loomed ahead, the bridge. Ralph reached out with his mind, feeling the presence of a powerful psionic entity beyond. Archon Krull, the ship's commander. The doors blew inward. Ralph strode onto the bridge, locking eyes with Krull. The Ulian towered over him, eyes glowing with malevolent energy. "You dare challenge me, human?" Krull's voice boomed in Ralph's mind. Ralph didn't waste breath on words. He lashed out with a psionic assault, probing for weaknesses in Krull's mental defenses. The alien retaliated, and Ralph staggered under the psychic onslaught. For long minutes they dueled, Ralph's precision and tactical wit against Krull's raw power. Sweat poured down Ralph's face as he pushed himself to the limit. With a final desperate surge, Ralph broke through. Krull's mental barriers shattered, and the alien fell to his knees, defeated. The dreadnought was theirs, as were its secrets. But the cost. Ralph stumbled from the captured flagship, his palms sweating. A third of his warriors were dead. Many more lay comatose, their psyches shattered by the strain. They limped back to Earth, victorious but broken. Ralph's heart sank as he saw the devastation below. Entire cities lay in ruins, collateral damage from their psionic battle. Worse, reports flooded in of humans manifesting uncontrolled abilities. The very power that had saved them now threatened to tear them apart. Ralph stood amid the rubble of what had once been downtown Chicago. He clenched his fists, pushing down the weight of guilt and grief. There was no time for self-pity. They had won their freedom, but the real work was just beginning. "We rebuild," Ralph said to the haggard survivors gathered around him. "We learn to control this power, and we make damn sure nothing like this ever happens again." The road ahead was long and treacherous, but for the first time in years, humanity's future lay in its own hands. Ralph would see it done, or die trying. Ralph's victory over the Ulians brought no respite. He stood in the rubble-strewn command center, holographic displays flickering with reports of chaos erupting across the globe. Untrained psionics, their powers awakened in the final battle, lashed out in fear and confusion. Another incident in Buenos Aires, a haggard aide reported. An entire apartment complex collapsed, casualties unknown. Ralph's eyebrows furrowed. He turned to his inner circle. "We need containment zones, now, and training facilities. We can't let this spread further." They worked tirelessly, converting abandoned military bases and stadiums into makeshift psionics academies. Ralph's remaining warriors, exhausted from the war, now found themselves teachers and peacekeepers. In a repurposed high school gym, Sarah guided a group of terrified teenagers. "Focus," she urged. "Picture the energy flowing through you like a river. Control its course." A boy's eyes glowed, a nearby chair lifting shakily into the air. His concentration slipped, and the chair shot across the room, splintering against the wall. "It's okay," Sarah soothed. "We'll try again." But for every small victory, a dozen crises erupted. Ralph's team raced from hotspot to hotspot, barely containing the chaos. In Seattle, they confronted their gravest threat yet. A cult had formed around a former accountant named Gerald, now styling himself the Awakened One. His followers believed their powers were divine gifts, meant to reshape the world. Ralph's strike team surrounded the cult's compound. "Last chance!" he shouted through a megaphone. "Surrender peacefully." Gerald's amplified voice boomed in response. "False prophet. We are the true inheritors of this power." The air crackled with psionic energy. Ralph barely raised a telekinetic shield as the compound exploded outward, hurling debris like shrapnel. His team pushed forward, deflecting attacks and launching their own. The battle raged for hours. City blocks crumbled under the onslaught of unchecked psionic might. Civilians fled screaming as cars were tossed like toys and concrete shattered. Ralph finally cornered Gerald atop a crumbling office building. The cult leader's eyes blazed with manic fervor. "You can't stop us," Gerald snarled. "We are the future." Ralph felt the man's power building to a crescendo. With a final, desperate surge, Ralph struck. Their minds clashed in a silent explosion that shook the very foundations of the city. When Ralph regained consciousness, the battle was over. Gerald lay comatose, his followers subdued or dead. But the cost... Ralph stumbled through the wreckage, past the broken bodies of his own warriors. In the days that followed, fear gripped the populace. Humans without powers eyed their psionic neighbors with suspicion and dread. Ralph knew he had to act decisively. He stood before a hastily assembled council of world leaders. "We can't continue like this," Ralph stated flatly. "I'm implementing mandatory screenings and containment for unstable psionics. Those who can't control their abilities will be interned for training and rehabilitation." Murmurs of protest rose, but Ralph silenced them with a look. "This isn't a debate. It's the only way to prevent total societal collapse." As the new measures took effect, Ralph felt the weight of his choices. He watched as frightened families were separated. Unstable psionics led away in restraints. Sarah confronted him in his office. "This isn't what we fought for, Ralph. We're becoming the very thing we defeated." We don't have a choice," Ralph snapped. "It's this or watch the world burn." Sarah's eyes hardened. "There's always a choice." She turned and walked out, several other senior members following in her wake. Ralph slumped in his chair, the alien cube heavy in his pocket. He had saved humanity from alien oppression, only to become its jailer. As reports of Sarah's growing rebellion reached him, Ralph knew the hardest battles still lay ahead.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.